Welcome to New York Bio's Virtual Breakfast Series, a digital program started in 2020, bringing you fireside chats with leaders across the healthcare spectrum. This week's episode features Nicole McKnight, COO of Anergent Pharmaceuticals.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hawks-Bland, and I'm the CEO at New York Bio. We're excited that you're with us for another edition of our virtual breakfast. We've had a few weeks off as people traveled over the summer and people were in and out. I find that New York in August is both lovely and more flexible. So we took advantage of some of that flexibility as well. Thank you to Nicole McKnight, who's here with us today. And special thank you to our sponsor for this month's series of breakfasts, VWR by Avantor. We're excited to have them always as a partner for our lab supply purchasing program. As always, let me ask you to please put your questions for the discussion that we have with Nicole in the chat or the Q&A, and Derek and I will get to those questions as we go through the discussion that we have this morning. One more programming note, which I will throw in here, is that we have our New York Bio annual meeting coming up on September 27th. And while September 27th seems like it's far away, it's not really that far away. It will be here before you know it. We'll survive UN week, and then we'll have the New York Bio annual meeting. So I hope you'll join us. I will put a link to our registration in the chat for everyone. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out to me. With that, let's get on with what we're here for today, which is our exciting conversation with Nicole. Derek, I'll kick it over to you.
All right. So by my count, we have done close to 150 of these things. And, we have highlighted so many people, and there are kind of several that we knew we had to have on, and there's a number that we knew we were looking forward to. And Nicole is certainly one. Right. I think you can count on one hand the number of people that have had the impact on New York City's biomedical ecosystem that she's had. And we are thrilled to have you here this morning, Nicole. So why don't we get started? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your kind of scientific origin story, and let's dig in. This conversation is going to cover everything.
Yeah.
Off you go. The floor is yours.
I know. Okay. Well, I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time too. And thank you both for this valuable resource and source of fun for the ecosystem every week. So, okay, maybe I'll start like earlier on than most people do. So we moved to Massachusetts when I was 8 years old. And I grew up seeing biotech in Boston and Cambridge, and, seeing the labs on Mass Ave in Cambridge and driving by. And, it always just seemed like a part of a big part of the city and the economy. And I liked biology a lot. So I decided pretty early on what I wanted to do. And I was really lucky and privileged to be able to have the opportunity to have some really fun summer jobs and internships at really early stage biotech. I did a summer internship at Millennium Pharmaceuticals doing maxi preps every day. And it was a really fun time to be in the industry, and things were really taking off. So I went to the University of Chicago for undergrad and studied biology, and through an alum who was working in a lab at Beth Israel, Harvard Medical School, I moved back to Boston and really gave it a good go. 2 years as a technician in the lab where, you're in charge of doing everything, and people really rely on you. And I had a great MD, PhD advisor who let me have my own projects and a lot of independence. And I really enjoyed it a lot. And it solidified that I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then I was really lucky to find myself as employee number 7 at a startup on Sydney Street in Cambridge, doing drug repositioning with a company that was called GeneLogic then. And I loved it. I fell in love with it. And, I was doing everything from checking in the UPS packages to presenting it, company-wide. lab meetings and building the tissue culture room. And my little group was working on ADME. But yeah, this was from 2004 to 2006. And again, just a really exciting time to be in that ecosystem. And I had some great mentors, bosses, and I realized I needed to get an advanced degree to do what I wanted to do. And actually, I had applied for MD, PhD programs and interviewed at a lot of places and got waitlisted. And sort of, I say the best thing that ever happened was that I didn't get into those programs because, doing research was really what I wanted to do. And I was 4 years out of college and took advantage of going to the UK, going to London to do my PhD, where the programs are more regimented in terms of time, and it's a strict 4-year program. And I'm actually a dual citizen, and my family was all over there. So moving to London was probably about as difficult as moving to California or something. So really enjoyed my time. Distance, yeah. And London was going through a real sort of cool time then, 2006 to 2011, and the music was great and still kind of gritty and fun. And our labs at Cancer Research UK at the London Research Institute were right smack dab in the middle of the city, in Lincoln's Inn Fields behind Holborn. And it made going into the lab on a Saturday afternoon okay if you could walk to Covent Garden and do some shopping and go to the pub afterwards. And the institute was amazing. It was very small. Cancer Research UK was at the time, if not still is, the biggest charity in the UK. So the labs were really well supported by volunteers who volunteered their time to work in shops and people leaving money to the charity. And we were a very small program, just 20 graduate students per year, and really, really fun international group with people from all over the world, and made some really close friends that still have. So, really, really great experience. Stressful to try and pack everything into a 4-year program. And I did a very ambitious PhD project. I did a genome-wide screen using siRNA to find new regulators of a membrane trafficking pathway called autophagy, which was just at that time going through a huge surge of interest and research. And there were a couple labs in Japan that had discovered all of the bacterial proteins that were involved in the process, and they're called ATG proteins, so ATG 1 through 30. And at the same time, in my lab, we were sort of discovering the mammalian homologs of those. And so it was just, everything was happening really fast, and it was a really great thing to study because it has a lot of implications in a lot of different systems and diseases. So you could take it down like an immunology pathway, a cancer pathway, and I ended up going down the neuroscience route. And yeah, I applied for only one lab for my postdoc at Mount Sinai. I was excited about living in that part of New York, excited about moving to New York, and the subsidized housing was good. So just sort of went all in and got into a lab that where we continued to study autophagy proteins, but in the context of neurodegeneration. And we had mouse models, so switching up the kind of system from cells to animal models. And half this lab was also studying Parkinson's disease. So the thing that is awesome about Sinai is that, you go to work in your lab, but you walk through the front door and you're walking into the hospital. And so, that translational element, which was very different from my graduate school, just seeing patients and feeling very close to that was a really fun aspect of working there. So I guess that gets us through a good number of years.
Well, you've laid all the groundwork, right? I mean, you've got basically now you've now kind of seen science in 3 different locations, and if you think about what it was like in New York in 2011 and 2012, right, it is not what it was like now, right? And I think one of the really interesting things is that we've always had this kind of entrepreneurial grad student population. Although, if you hadn't been in New York at that time, you didn't really recognize necessarily the contrast between the opportunities that folks have now and really what was there then. So, I'm kind of teeing you up for the Kiln discussion,
Sure.
right? So let's talk a little bit about, tell us a little bit about how that came together and what Kiln was, because I think it was actually a really important development that honestly a lot of programs now really kind of owe it to you for starting it.
Yeah, so I showed up sort of bright-eyed in New York City with this kind of entrepreneurial spirit that had been planted. And I was like, okay, I'm going to commercialize something from my postdoc. I'm going to start a company, or I'm just going to do a postdoc for like 2 years, and then I'm going to join a company. And I showed up and fell in love with New York, but I was like, oh no, there's nothing here. And like, oh, there are no companies. So 4 other postdocs and I, so Yana, Gabri, Marina, Ilsa, and I, all postdocs at the time, we crashed this grad school course on entrepreneurship. It was a sort of academic year-long kind of boot camp, like micro MBA, kind of thinking about how to commercialize things. And it was a project-based course. So we were tasked with teaming up and identifying a problem in the sphere of healthcare and setting out to really solve that problem, whether it was, coming up with a new medical device, or apps were just sort of coming on. Digital health was just sort of starting to.
Yeah.
And I convinced my team that we should tackle a different sort of problem, and that we should try and build an incubator, build a co-working space for biotech startups, because it seemed very clear that the problem that we didn't have any companies was that anytime anybody invented something from one of the amazing research institutes, they had to take their company somewhere else. And it was a really fun project. And we made a really important decision early on to structure it as a nonprofit. And it was a really difficult decision, and we had a lot of heated debate around it. But
well, there were 5 of you. That was going to be inevitable.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, there was always
5 people don't start anything and agree on it. So that's a whole other dynamic.
I mean, our conversations, we were so diligent about it, and we had this class every week, but we used to meet Monday evenings at 5 in like a, in a room in Hess, and just sort of debate things for, and we have some devil's advocates on the team, and it was really fun. And we actually were great friends still. And, we started just doing a lot of outreach to the community, to the local assemblymen, and talking to everybody in the community, started to talk and pitch to the New York City Economic Development Corporation back when that was that kind of original life science team. And it was still Bloomberg as well. So we were seeing what was happening with Alexandria, and Alexandria Center for Life Sciences had just opened. So there was a lot of stuff just starting to happen. And I will give a shout out to one of the very first organizations that started to bring the community together, which was NYC Tech Connect, which was sponsored by the city and the Partnership for New York City.
Yep.
And Sherry Coulter Ford headed that up, and Maria Gotch and Kathy Wild were funders and backers of that. And so they used to host monthly seminars that really were the first networking events, besides New York Bio, actually, and the annual conference and things like that. But a monthly seminar. And then they had this great idea to bring together entrepreneurial postdocs and grad students from across the city. And so we used to meet once a month early in the morning down in Bowling Green. And I have some great friends from that program too. And a lot of the CEOs from our favorite New York City born and bred companies have come out of that program too.
Yep.
Which is really fun. Anyways, back to Kiln. So I was introduced to Johannes Freuhoff up in Cambridge, who had founded Cambridge Biolabs and was working as co-founder of Lab Central, which is really, really groundbreaking in terms of incubators and co-working for biotech startups. And they got started with what now feels like not that much money, but the $5 million that they got from the state of Massachusetts allowed them to build 30,000 square feet, which became the gold standard of how to imagine these sort of spaces and set them up so that people are interacting with each other, bumping into each other. The lab is on display, science on display, lots of glass. You can really see people working and try and pack as many people into a smallish space as possible and get enough companies together to really have them learn from each other. And so he was really mentoring us and encouraging us to adopt this model where sponsors, big pharma, groups like VWR, equipment providers, will support the quite high cost of operating these things and getting them built. So we just started making those relationships. Meanwhile, I was still, working hard in the lab, doing my postdoc, trying to publish papers. And, my PI would come through and see me late at night on the computer. And little did he know that I was emailing senators and pharma CEOs asking them for money. So, I think doing a postdoc is a really, really great opportunity to do two things at once and really start building your network. And there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom with your time. And as long as you're getting your work done and being productive, I think it's a great time. I will say, I was co-president of the Postdoc Association, and this was back before there was a decent raise in postdoc salaries. I mean, I think in general, postdocs are still overworked and underpaid, but back in 2011, 2012, 2013, it was bad, right? And I joke, so I was in subsidized housing, and they used to take my rent out of my paycheck, and there was nothing left. Nothing left at all. And I came and I actually negotiated my salary a little bit too, was getting paid a bit more, because I'm like, I'm not getting paid less than when I was a technician, when I was a research associate before I had my PhD. So, I don't know if it's still this way, but at Sinai, which is very similar to other institutions, we were sort of 80% non-American J1 visa holders. And, there was a lot of advocating for my fellow postdocs and trying to get that community together too. And so we put together a great annual symposium and exposed exposed the postdocs to a lot of ideas. And actually the highlight of that was having Mark Tessier-Levine host one on entrepreneurship, which back in, I think that was probably 2013 or something like that. Like it was just, you know, things were really exciting in New York for the ecosystem, but things were slow too, you know.
Yeah.
It was
It was
exciting,
really
but
slow.
not mature, right?
Yeah.
Things hadn't started to mature.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny too, because I remember when the Alexandria building went up, you know, there was a sense that it was great and it was real, but there was also a piece of the community that said this is really expensive. And there was, you know, I think people kind of weren't sure it was going to work, right? You heard about what the cost was going to be, and you said, "Oh, there's no way that's going to be too expensive." And you know, the building opened its doors and it was full, right, immediately. And there was plans for a second building almost immediately, and it gave a sense that, you know, oh, this can work, right? And it's interesting. You said before you showed up in New York and said there's no companies. I mean, there were, but they were kind of scattered all over the place, and you had to find them, right? And that's kind of that's a very, very big, it's a stark difference to where we are now, right? And we're getting there, right? Because I think one of the biggest things that happened is we did have, between biolabs, JLabs, et cetera, the incubators, in addition to kind of putting the science on display, it puts all of these companies in a place where people can see them and people can visit them. And not only do the companies get a working knowledge of each other, if someone goes to visit company X, they also bump into the other 10 of them. And that, you know, kind of osmotic effect is really, really useful. And you hear about more. It adds a level of kind of fluidity to the ecosystem where you don't have to dig as hard to find the stuff that's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And let me still say that still took a really long time. So
yeah,
I left my postdoc at the end of 2014 and actually joined the biolabs team. So off the back of the success of Lab Central, through the for-profit company biolabs, the team was looking to recreate that success in other major cities and biotech hubs. So I spearheaded the New York group, but we had a partner doing San Diego, doing Durham, North Carolina. We already had a partnership in San Francisco with QB3. So, you know, it was a really exciting time. And we were all tasked with kind of engaging with the local economic development engines and in many cases partnering with universities just to try and raise the significant capital to get these things actually built. And then, as I mentioned before, you know, amassing the sponsors and the partners that would support the operational costs to really make this really high-end spaces where companies, even if they've only been able to raise an SBIR, they still, you know, are working alongside companies that have just raised a like significant Series A. And, you know, that was really part of the philosophy around it. But, you know, it took 4 years in New York, and it was a long time coming. And I watched my partners sort of open up their spaces in the course of that. But, you know, I started just looking for commercial real estate leases, which was really interesting and fun, and looked all over. I joke with Bill Harvey, who was our broker, that we looked at every single manufacturing zoned building sort of south of 133rd and in Long Island City. And I go back and I look at my phone and I've got all of these pictures of me like on the roof of buildings, and all of these pictures are like gray concrete. They all look the same, you know.
And you could have been in front of one.
Buildings.
Yeah.
And
no, go ahead, finish that. And then
I was just going to say, you know, the city too, there was a lot of impetus to make this work, and especially through the NYC EDC. But there were some major hurdles in New York that were different from other places. So, you know, zoning was an issue, and it was still sort of a very gray area to take the risk of a non-manufacturing zone building and building out lab space. We weren't quite sure, the process of that is difficult. And then things were expensive still. And then convincing landlords that, that biotech in the garment district is a good idea was hard, and it took many years. And, shout out to groups like Taconic and Matt Weir, where, we looked at 619 West 54th very early on. Mm-hmm. And, that building now, they took the risk to really develop that and other buildings now. So
that one, their West End Labs building on 66th Street is glorious. It's awesome.
Yeah.
They've done an amazing job. And it's really funny, you talk about kind of selling this to landlords. Like if you presented the case for a biotech incubator to anyone in business school, they would all tell you this is a terrible idea. Like, you take these companies, your customers are short-term companies without a lot of cash or runway, with science that may never turn into a product, and almost mostly no management experience, and these are your ideal customers. And somehow amazingly they've gotten this model to work. It's kind of just a testament to the fact that biotech needs a home, and they needed to find a way to make it happen.
And the funny thing was
differently.
Yeah, exactly. The marketing. So we were between a rock and a hard place, because it was when WeWork was really taking off, and we were watching in parallel, watching the WeWork machine just
right.
But we couldn't really. So it didn't really work for us to be like, we're the WeWork of biotech, because the landlords didn't like it. They didn't want that in their building. So it was hard, and in the end it actually did prove too difficult to do it on our own, and cue the great partnership with NYU Langone. So we teamed up with Bob Schneider and their entrepreneurship sort of engine, and the real estate and development and facilities group. And we had this really great relationship between Biolabs and NYU Langone that took a while to negotiate. And, the idea was that they would continue to lease the space at 180 Varick Street, where ImClone had built the labs there. I guess I used to say 30 years ago, but now I think it's like 35 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was this amazing Soho Hudson Square factory building that nobody realized that there was a whole floor, 25,000 square feet of lab in this random gorgeous old factory building on the street. So, that after ImClone was bought by Eli Lilly, NYU Langone took over the space and had some academic labs in there, but the labs weren't very happy there. They felt separated from everything. So it was the perfect location, really great space, some aging facilities, some aging systems. So on a kind of shoestring budget, we managed to create something pretty amazing. And that was also only made possible by the grant that we got from the New York City Economic Development Corporation. So just to rewind a little bit, we applied for money from the state, from Empire State Development, back before I don't even remember where we thought we were going to be, but we managed to get $2 million from the state then through the Regional Economic Development Committee. And at that time, that was the most amount of money that any New York City project had ever gotten from the state, which was really, made us very proud to have gotten that. And so we had that $2 million, and then we raised $5 million from the EDC through an official RFP response. So, together with the support from some significant capital support from NYU Langone, we renovated that 50,000 square feet.
Yeah. So we have a question, and I think it's an important one to think about, just to give a little kind of flavor to things. The question is, why not set up something in New Jersey, like Jersey City, Hoboken, Union City, et cetera? And even at the time, and I think this was important, the vision, or the thing that kept getting thrown around, was how do you create the next Kendall Square, right? Which we can talk about on a different thing. I don't know that that's really possible, but I think one of the big things was location, ease of access, et cetera. And it became, I think, a really important point to actually put it in Manhattan, right? And even now, I think Long Island City has developed such that it's actually really easily commutable. But the other example was the biobat facility, which was really difficult to get to. And it kind of underscored the need to basically be able to get there on the subway, be able to kind of go between the universities and there in a relatively easy fashion. And honestly, the Hudson Square location is fantastic. I'm biased, right? I'm on the west side, so anything on the 1, 2, or 3 trains is a fantastic location. But I think it was important for a lot of reasons that people showed it was possible to put it in Manhattan. And it was actually kind of a bit lucky that you had put biolabs at 180 Varick, and then J Labs basically came in 2 blocks down the street at 101 6th Avenue, or basically where 6th Avenue hits Canal Street, to put J Labs there. So almost in the blink of an eye, we went from having no incubators to having 3 incubators and space for kind of 100 co-located companies. So it was almost, it was 4 years of work and an overnight success after it happened. I think it changed a lot of things almost immediately.
Yeah, no, and we were all really supportive of each other. So Launch Labs at Alexandria and J Labs, which opened this summer of 2018, and then Biolabs just at the very, very beginning of 2019. And yeah, like you said, all of a sudden overnight, it's like, okay, we've solved this problem. People were complaining for a very long time about the lack of lab space, and I think it was a major hurdle, but we solved it all together. And then then there were complaints about, well, what happens when the companies get too big and they need to move out? And now that problem is solved too, with InnoLabs and other kind of graduation space, as we call it. So yeah,
it's a good problem to have, right? Originally, the problem was the companies had no place to go, and now that the companies have some place to go, the question is, well, what happens when we're successful, right? It's like it's a good next problem to have.
Yeah, and it's still difficult for companies, and it's still taking a while. And I will say COVID, I think, really, really hurt New York City's biotech ecosystem. As opposed to what I saw. I actually spent COVID up in Massachusetts, and what happened there was the opposite. Like, Kendall Square was just on fire. Like it was amazing. And, we joke, like, one step forward, maybe one step back, but slowly. And it is night and day. And I will say, I really love the New York City biotech ecosystem for its kind of underdog spirit and its inclusivity and its collaboration. And I don't want to sound super cheesy, but like, we are really supportive of each other. And we hear this phrase, rising tides raises all ships. And we do feel like we're really in it together. And, the leadership in these companies, we all know each other, and we're all supporting each other, and it doesn't feel like we're competing for resources or funding or a success for our fellow biotech startup is a success for this city. So yeah, I do really like it.
And I think we have plenty of space, right, for more. And like, it was interesting when I joined New York Bio in 2018, I, came from totally different, right? Like large pharma companies, lawyer background, right? So just totally different sort of background. And people were still talking, to your point, Nicole. In fact, I think you might have even been on a panel, one of the first one, and it was still
Probably.
like, yeah, like we don't have enough space. We don't have early stage space. And I'm like, wait, we've got one, two. I was like, what are these people talking about? And so it was interesting to me to kind of come in at that point, right? And now to see not only the space, but just the potential to, right? Like, I just think it's the potential is now concrete with the structural things to support these companies. And so I think that gives us a lot more sort of upside for all the boats, as you said, right, to rise with the tide. So I think that's a really important distinction. And so maybe we talk about now, maybe we move on to sort of what you did after you got biolabs ready to launch.
So I joined a very early stage French company that was a early resident of JLabs. So the CEO of this company, which was then called McKnight, the CEO, Patrice, really wanted to have a foothold in New York City, and was one of the original resident companies of JLabs. And he tasked me, brought me on to build out the team here in the US and raise presence here and try and raise money for the company. And it was a really exciting opportunity because the technology was really interesting. So it was a kind of platform technology where there were these microbiome associated molecules that our scientific founder had hypothesized had therapeutic potential. And our lead molecule was really, really interesting and found to be neuroprotective. So we were developing that as a early treatment for Parkinson's disease and potentially Alzheimer's disease. So it was really interesting timing to be a kind of gut-brain axis company, a microbiome company. That the field of microbiome was really just starting to get the recognition that it deserved, and also the scientific acceptance that I think it didn't have for a long time. And at the same time, I think, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and neurodegeneration is such a huge problem, and it had been very much underfunded in the, pharma biotech world. And that was
people wouldn't touch it.
Yep. Starting to change. So it felt like good timing. It was really great, built out a team, recruited a really great chief scientific officer. We had a great scientist, recruited a director of business development. And we had this great little team in JLabs, and we were collaborating with our team in Paris. And I have to say, it was very fun, sort of going back and forth. Pre-COVID, we had our office in Le Marais, and I was definitely enjoying being, I joined as COO, and then I took over a year later and became CEO. We went through a really important kind of rebranding exercise. So the company was called McKnight, which was very confusing and it didn't have a lot of meaning. And we used a great group to rebrand as Stellate Therapeutics, and really built a very professional deck and image, and went out and started trying to raise a significant Series A for developing our lead molecule and doing a trial in Parkinson's, which is very expensive and difficult. And so I leveraged a lot of the relationships that I had built both through Kiln and as through biolabs. And sort of, I think one of these questions is like, how did we weigh up being kind of nonprofit or sort of zero profit with being for profit? And I do think that it really came in handy when I used to organize panels and I used to invite venture capitalists to come sit on the panels. I wasn't asking them for money back then, right? I was just building the ecosystem. And then, you turn around and it's like, okay, now it's time for a meeting. And I found it very rewarding and easy to get in front of potential investors and other stakeholders. And yeah, I really enjoyed that, wore a lot of hats. I mean, I talked about building the team, but for a while there were only just two of us. And I was really chief scientific officer. I was chief operating officer, and I was
hats
all at the same time. And, I enjoyed that. You carry a lot of burden and a lot of stress. And we have a great group of kind of C-suite, New York C-suite people, and we get together and we sort of talk about the hardship and the difficulties of really leading a company. And it's like lonely at the same time, but
there's a lot of that stuff that kind of people only really understand if they've done it, right? And I think one of the things that you just hit on is, you have the other, usually the second person at the company tends to suck up most of the things that don't get sucked up by the CEO. So your job is like, end the rest of it, right? So the CEO is raising money, and if you need to do things as either the chief medical officer or chief scientific officer, that those things tend to fall onto your plate. So it's hard. You have to be incredibly versatile. And I think the nice thing now is that it is, I don't want to say maybe it's easier to now put those bigger puzzle pieces in place from a management perspective, right? So I'm conscious of the time, and I actually want to give a decent amount of airtime to your new venture because it's really exciting. And so why don't you talk a little bit about, I don't know, kind of how that's come together, and a little bit of background on Energen so we can get into that.
Sure. Yeah. So I met Energen's CEO, Bruce Cohen, back when I was pitching for money for Stellate, and actually in Alexandria through the pre-Gallian med startup sponsored by Business France. They put together a great sort of partnering meeting that coincided with the pre-Gallian ceremony. And so this would have been like the fall of 2019, I think. And so Bruce is a veteran VC. He is representing Zaraya Capital, which is the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, and he was based in Boston. And we realized we had a lot in common straight away, including stints living in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And we just became sort of biotech friends and kept in touch. So that, after I left Stellate and was looking for a COO role, because actually another great thing about wearing a lot of hats is that you realize which one you like best. And
it's a narrowing process.
Yep. To all of the things that we were just talking about, I actually think that the COO role is really ideal for me. And I have a kind of weird passion for operations that a lot of people don't have, because it's the difficult kind of crappy jobs sometimes that you have to take care of. And I really like this idea of setting up a company for success from very early on, and putting systems in place and doing things the right way from the very, very, very beginning. Yeah. And so, reached back out to Bruce and found out that he, in parallel to his VC gig, he was working with the co-founders of Energen to raise money and get this thing off the ground. So what it is, it's a drug delivery platform technology that involves a medical device that loads drug onto a swab so that you rub it on the inside of your cheek and you deliver the drug through what's called the buccal membrane or the oral mucosa. And the drug goes straight into the bloodstream very quickly, bypasses the gut and the liver, and is a really great way to deliver drugs to patients who are either incapacitated, unconscious, unable to swallow, scared of needles, which actually describes a lot of
I was going to say,
out there.
yeah.
Right. And so, you know, it's a very simple but elegant medical device that's sort of like, I should have one actually, but it's a bit of a plunger. It's 5 inches long. The drug is suspended in a proprietary kind of resin sticky solution so that, and ethanol, so that then the drug, when swabbed onto the inside of the cheek, it sticks there and it's protected from saliva, which, you know, was a bit of a breakthrough. We've known about the buccal membrane for a long time, and drugs have been delivered there, but using patches or, you know, similar to sublingual, but
Right.
all of those things have kind of, they're messy and difficult. And so this is a very elegant solution, fully now issued patent as of April, fully independently owned by Anergen, and was developed, co-founded by our chief medical officer, who has a ton of experience doing this and has spearheaded a great pre-IND meeting with the FDA, where we're really encouraged by this sort of fast track pathway, 505(b)(2 it's called.
Yeah.
And the first drug that we're using to deliver is naloxone, Narcan, for opioid overdose rescue. Mm-hmm. So this drug is extremely safe, safer than probably anything out there. So, and the FDA is really motivated for new technologies around that will help with the opioid fentanyl epidemic, which, as I mean, I don't have to tell people how bad it is, right? And it's getting getting worse and worse and worse. So we think that there's a market, and there have been groups that have kind of paved the way for us, because nasal delivery of drugs has been successful. So nasal Narcan has saved a lot of people's lives, but we think that there are some things about our technology that make it even easier to use and more effective. So yeah.
I mean, really, you don't.
Oh, I was just going to say, didn't nasal Narcan just receive OTC approval recently?
Yep, they did, and it should be coming out in stores near you, maybe next month or October. But you know, there's a lot of question about the cost of it, because the nasal device is actually quite expensive. It's a kind of complicated device, and it's made by a separate company. So anybody who wants to use this one nasal spray device has to license and pay for that device. So part of what makes our technology great, it's injection molded plastic. We're going to make it somewhere in the US, maybe New Jersey. And it's a lot cheaper as well. So, you know, we just want to get this out there to the people who need it, and validate our technology, validate our platform. And then we have drugs in the pipeline that we think, you know, can really help a lot of people and make us a lot of money too. So the second drug that we're going to do is epinephrine, to really disrupt the EpiPen market.
I mean, literally, as you were describing it, right? The EpiPen is the easiest analogy, right? You look at something where they took, you know, kind of ease of use delivery in emergency situations and made it, you know, almost ubiquitous. And now they've kind of, you know, now they've basically walked themselves into a corner with the pricing battle, right? So you have that. I mean, it's not to go near that too much, but there's a, you know, there's definitely a lever that you can pull there, but you're highlighting something where if you change the delivery and make it easier and accessible, you can actually get it so that a lot of people use it, right? And it's a great forefront of innovation. And like you said, this is a large enough problem that any kind of solution that can be used efficiently and effectively can really kind of save a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, I can rattle off a kind of list of things that we're thinking about developing, but fast acting migraine, epilepsy, anti-anxiety drugs, pain, for people who can't swallow, people with Parkinson's disease that can't swallow pills, children's Tylenol, all of these things that are kind of difficult to deliver.
Pet meds.
Pet medication. Oh,
yeah.
You only need to read the thing on the internet about giving a cat a pill, or having, been to the point to like try and get your child to, swallow Tylenol to have him or her spit it all over the place. Like that's a reasonably shared experience. So I think there's a lot of parents nodding in unison there.
We've actually had a couple of questions, I think, that about the sort of expedited, right? The 505(b)(2) track. One is, I'm going to give you both of them and you can kind of take them. Right? Have you found investors to be excited, right, about an accelerated track? And then the other one is animal or human data. What's sort of required by the FDA to take advantage of the track?
Yeah, so I'll do the second one first. So we did a quite simple dog study that showed that the uptake was very efficient using our device. So we know more than 85% of it gets out of the device and onto the cheek. And then we measure the level of the naloxone in the blood, and we see really rapid uptake. So it's, in comparison to intramuscular injection. So we took this data and a pre-IND package to the FDA, and they were very encouraging. And we think we only need to do a 30-patient bioequivalency study to show that the amount of naloxone getting into the bloodstream is comparable to the nasal Narcan. So it's actually a very quick, simple thing. We have to show some stability of the drug, in the little kind of Nespresso pod inside the device, with our proprietary mixture. And then with the naloxone, it's because of the opioid crisis, it's an accelerated approval. So a 6 month to full approval. So, we are now raising money to create the actual clinical grade device and get that through that study. And so, we are encouraged with the investor meetings that we've had. It's still early days. So, we are, both Bruce and I are transitioning from our previous things anyway. So it's been a lot of sweat equity and hitting the ground running this summer. Bruce is moving to New York City. So this is going to be a New York City company. So we're just really excited. We feel like we've got the tools with our IP and, with this strong indication of what we need to do to get there. We think that we can get this approved in 18 months. So that's the value proposition for the investors, give us a bit of money now. And this is very different than therapeutics. When I was trying to raise $30 million to develop a Parkinson's disease drug, we need a couple $1 million to get to these major inflection points. And so, we're saying to investors, especially this, in this weird market, that we can give you return on investment significantly and quickly. And, if we think about sort of down the road potential exits, when we've proved that we can do this with a couple different drugs, we're excited about the long-term opportunities for that.
I would think so, right? You're playing in a really interesting space. I think, even as people think more about repurposing and all sorts of other things, I think people realize there are a lot of ways to impact patients than, more so than, needing to develop the next, Imbruvica or whatever needs to come out. So you have, I think, a really cool angle with this. It's a really necessary one. And, like you said, the clinical path, if it's 18 months, that's great. You now are thinking about things like, how do you build a commercial team, and how do you actually get it out to early customers, and how do you, get it so it makes an impact. And again, it's a different looking biotech company, but we've said, for a long time that biotech companies in New York don't have to look like biotech companies everywhere else. It's actually one of the huge benefits of being here. And I can imagine that, the hospital environments here and systems are, really just kind of, grade A customers for the things you're trying to do.
Yeah. And also, we'd love to have some pharma partnerships too. So if there are drugs that are not sort of working very well for oral bioavailability, or would really benefit from the formulation, our unique formulation and delivery, and people don't want to take injections for things.
Yeah.
And we look at all the sort of weight loss.
I was gonna say the GLP.
Right, it's an auto injector, and
So
I think there's a lot of opportunity there for partnerships and co-developing things too, which I think being in New York is a great place for that too.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So I know we only have a few minutes left, and you've participated in enough of these to know they will always ask the sort of why New York. We've heard about your early experiences with New York, but like when you all started building a new company here, why New York?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, because I want to live in New York. So, it's a wonderful city. I've lived in lots of cities across the world, and it's my favorite. And I just love it. Compared to a place like Boston, which is obviously great for people in our industry, but if you have a partner who's not, in the industry, it's not ideal. We're hoping to get an office in the new Deerfield Cure building. We just need an office. We don't need lab. And, that new building is just phenomenal, and the location is great. And, that's I want to have an office on Park Avenue South. Like that's what I want.
So it's super Manhattan.
No, but and just going back to the community, I think there's just so much support and goodwill, and just want to leverage all of the, all of the relationships that I've built over the years. And, I just really looking forward to it.
Well, I think one of the things that we said we look forward to in New York is the folks out of the groups of companies that are going to kind of grow up here and are going to, be big here and are going to make an impact here. And, we're a little biased on you because we've known you for ages and we know you're terrific, but honestly, you're doing something now. It's really cool. It's kind of a culmination, I think, of, really fantastic work that's made a huge impact already. So, this, but we can publicly say we are very, very vociferously rooting for your success.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you've been an amazing, not only addition, but catalyst, right, for the development of our ecosystem. And I know that I have appreciated getting to know you, especially as someone who came in totally new, right, to the ecosystem. It's been a pleasure. And I was super excited that we finally worked out the scheduling to have you join us on a virtual breakfast series. And so with that, I think we're at time. I hope everyone has a great Tuesday. Thank you so much, Nicole and Derek. I did put in a discount in case you missed the early bird registration for the annual meeting on September 27th. I put in a VBS discount for 20% that takes it back to the early bird. So you still have a chance. It's VBS 2023 exclamation point is the discount code. And I put it in the chat. So everyone have a great Tuesday. We will see you back here next week. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.